Good afternoon and welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. I saw a statement by the White House today about putting down of Harambe the gorilla. I had some thoughts on it. The civilization that pauses with sentimentality for Harambe is good. But if it at the same time legislates indifference towards the child in the womb, I think we've reached a certain point of publicized moral absurdity. This is the statement that was put out today. Today we remember a legend. On this day in history, Harambe would have celebrated another birthday, an icon that became part of internet history, American culture, and an entire generation's timeline. He became a symbol of loyalty, strength, chaos, unity, and the strange beauty of the internet bringing millions of people together for one cause. Never forgetting Harambe. Gone but never forgotten. Rest easy to a true patriot. At no point in that incoherent rambling was a modicum of reason. But this is the official poetry of a spiritually exhausted age. And it's given with earnestness from the highest civic platform in the country and in the world, directed towards Harambe. Here's the issue I have. That same political culture still strains every single legal muscle to preserve the ridiculous fiction that abortion is healthcare, because apparently, if we treat a zoo tragedy with reverent cultural language, we also have to, at the same time, treat the deliberate destruction of unborn human life with evasion. Animal death matters to a certain degree. We all recognize the degrees. We don't mourn the death of the chicken on our plate, but we do feel a sense of loss at the death of a gorilla that was put down. That's reasonable. The disorder begins when a culture can instinctively grieve animal death with public solemnity, but it's trained itself to speak about unborn children with sterile language. That's the absurdity. Federal law protects bald and golden eagle eggs along with their nests. Federal wildlife authorities say that violations can bring severe fines and imprisonment. Endangered animal species have protections that extend to sea turtles, their nests, and the like. Now, that means our legal system understands the concept that life inside an egg still has remarkable moral value. And so we can have focus on that. The problem is when we start turning our attention to life within the womb of a mother. Life that is forming, human life that's forming within the womb of a woman. The defenders of this arrangement call it compassion. Oh, we're really gifted at inventing compassionate language, because then it helps us feel better about keeping while our hands get stained with blood. The word healthcare has become the preferred sanctuary for the act that ends the life of a distinct human person who already possesses the intrinsic orientation of an entire human life, an immortal human life. And the biological truth is embarrassingly direct. That's why so much of the ideological fog has to be pumped into the room. Embryology has long recognized fertilization begins a new organismal human life. Every single medical school worth its salt recognizes this. So the abortion regime survives culturally by forcing society to ignore the fact that it is human life. Pope Leo XIV, in his recent warning about Europe, diagnosed its drastic sterility. He means that this is a culture that's rejected the Christian meaning of the family, but yet it's demanding a future from the very children it has declined to welcome. And so Leo rightly placed a solution in the fundamental dignity of all human persons, founded on marriage between a man and a woman. Europe's demographic winter, the West, didn't arrive through some mysterious atmospheric event. We let this happen. Decades of sexual revolution, contraceptive ideology, abortion politics, economic fear, delayed marriage, anti-natal policy incentives, and a therapeutic view of life. We, as a society, taught men and women to measure children mainly as inconvenience. The sociological lie told us that freedom requires autonomy, even from fertility, from children. The economic lie said that children are mainly an expense. The political lie said that motherhood is a private lifestyle choice. The cultural lie said that fulfillment requires for an adult life to be protected from the unholy interruption of babies. And so now, that same society complains about the collapse of pensions, labor shortages, elderly isolation, and the general economic anxiety of a culture with too few workers to support its too many dependents. Honestly, as far as an analogy goes, that's like burning down the orchard for 50 or 60 years and then commissioning a government study on why we suddenly have a shortage of apples. The developing world, however, the third world, and many Islamic nations, they've retained stronger birth rates because they have a preserved consensus. The basic social confidence: children are assets and heirs and helpers and future citizens. Now, they don't have the same language of Christianity in the West, but they at least understand that basic natural truth about children. Meanwhile, here in the affluent West, we've spent our inheritance on a consumer anthropology that has taught us to treat children as an inconvenience for adults. Now, this doesn't mean that poorer nations have solved every moral question around family life, or poverty, or instability, or whatever. It does mean that we in the West have performed the uniquely sophisticated feat of making wealth into a reason for our own sterility, and then we weaponized our education into the way in which we guaranteed our civilizational self-erasure. But the deeper crisis is theological. Every child is created through the mysterious cooperation of God and the marital act. Every conception brings into existence an immortal and unrepeatable human person who otherwise would have had no earthly life, which means that the sexual union requires reverence, not just the language of legal consent. When husband and bride give themselves according to the language of the body, and sometimes outside of wedlock, God still permits the bodily union to become the threshold through which a new immortal soul enters history. That truth ought to re-inform all of our economics and politics and housing policy, or workplace expectations, or tax law, parish life education, you name it. The entire architecture of social family support. The late John Paul II taught in Familiaris Consortio, the future of humanity passes by way of the family. That sentence should be written above every legislature, every chancery, every school board office, every corporate human resource department, you name it. The practical demands of family life in the West are so often treated like an irritating scheduling problem. It is the foundation of social survival, friends. The progressive culture of death has therefore become the author of its own, not only political decline, but its own demise. Movements that sterilize their adherents eventually discover that, well, they've killed themselves off because their movements can't generate the next generation. And that's why the current demographic crisis will increasingly become a civilizational sorting mechanism. Communities that welcome children are going to inherit the future through ordinary mathematics: birth, formation, cultural memory, worship of God, but work and sacrifice. And communities that despise fertility, well, they're going to be relics in museums. The slogans will be there, but the apartment buildings will be empty. The West has spent decades mocking large families as irresponsible. Now it's panicking because fertility is collapsing. And then we're hiring consultants across the world to explain why young adults are isolated, anxious, romantically confused, or economically nervous, and not having children, delaying marriage. We even rewrote our medical system to do this. Right now, the medical system treats fertility as a pathology to suppress, rather than a healthy capacity to steward and honor. And this has especially harmed women by teaching them to distrust the rhythms of their bodies, insisting that motherhood is only socially valuable when every other ambition and preference has been met. Psychology has also done it's treated this whole situation poorly, because adults have been encouraged to seek permanent self-therapy, self-optimization, not generative love. Erik Erikson, a social psychologist, actually wrote that adulthood has generativity as its central task in mature life. So if you take children out of the equation, then human beings grow up becoming allergic to adulthood itself. Economics has completed the deception. We've priced our families into exhaustion. Housing markets are unbearable. Education costs, medical bills, work structures. Many of them are anti-family. And so the answer here is not sentimental nostalgia, but it's also not governmental micromanagement. We have to convert ourselves, rethink the way we live. Marriage, parish culture, practical solidarity, pro-family laws. Men, you and I must be summoned away from extended adolescence. We must embrace male adulthood and maturity and fatherhood as a vocation from a young age. Women must be honored in motherhood and never reduced to mere economic utility. The Christian tradition teaches us the family is the communion of persons ordered towards life, and that's what flourishes society. There are some people who say, well, yeah, but I don't have the feeling of fatherhood or motherhood. I don't feel like having children, and that saddens me. That's a poor position. God's vocation doesn't wait for the perfect emotional preparation. The ordinary path of human flourishing is always obedience to the vocation first, and then joy follows. It's never been the other way around. The church's position is direct. Every innocent human life must be protected from conception to natural death. Marriage is the union of one man and one woman. Children are gifts from God. Civil society has a grave duty to support all of this if we want to preserve our next generation. So yes, let's evangelize souls, encourage joyful marriages, and create serious material and structural supports for families. The West can continue composing official elegies for Harambe, but if we pretend confusion about our empty nurseries, well, then we are the authors of our own demise. No, we've been digging this grave, and the only way forward is to look to Christ and the solution that the church offers us. Stay tuned for the next hour. I'm Marcus Peter.